It all began one winter evening when I received a phone call from my father. His voice was calm yet distant, as though he was mustering the courage to say something he had rehearsed countless times. "I need your help," he finally admitted, breaking the silence that had defined our relationship for years. I was surprised but not entirely caught off guard. Our history was riddled with unresolved issues. Yet I listened, knowing this conversation would deepen the wounds of our past. My father explained the situation. Emma, my youngest stepsister, had faced a severe medical emergency. The financial burden had nearly drained the family's savings. My stepmother, Susan, had done her best to manage, but my father had made a choice that left me reeling. He had used Julia's college fund to cover the expenses without her knowledge. Now, he wanted me to step in and help with Julia's tuition. The request was audacious, especially given his history of broken promises. Years ago, he assured me he would support my college education, only to later say, "You're on your own." That betrayal had set the tone for our fractured relationship. As he spoke, memories of my childhood flooded back. The shouting matches between my parents, nights spent seeking refuge at my grandparents' house, and the unbearable role of mediator I had been forced to play. These experiences shaped me, leaving scars that never truly healed. When my parents divorced, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief. For the first time, the house was quiet. I could breathe. The constant tension that suffocated me was gone, and I thought things might improve. But life had other plans. When my father remarried, Susan and her young daughter Julia became part of our family. Adjusting to this new dynamic was challenging, especially since Julia seemed to take priority in my father's eyes. I vividly remember the day she moved in and claimed my room. "She's just a child trying to adapt. You're older, you'll understand," my father said. His words stung, but I reluctantly complied, hoping to avoid further conflict. Susan, to her credit, defended my right to my space, but it was clear my father's priorities had shifted. Over the years, my relationship with Susan evolved. She treated me with kindness and genuine care, often acting as a buffer between my father and me. Despite her efforts, the rift between my father and me widened. His decisions consistently left me feeling alienated. When Emma was born, he informed me that my college fund would no longer be available. "We can't afford it," he said, as if it were a simple matter. My mother stepped in to support me, but the damage was done. I graduated with debt and a lingering resentment that never quite faded. Now, years later, he was asking for my help. Julia had grown into a kind and thoughtful young woman, and she wasn't to blame for my father's choices. After much deliberation, I agreed to assist, but on my terms. I demanded transparency and insisted the money go directly to Julia. My father reluctantly agreed, though his hesitance deepened my mistrust. Days later, Susan called me in tears, expressing her gratitude for my support. Her sincerity was undeniable, and for a moment, I felt a glimmer of hope that things might improve. But that hope was short-lived. As my wedding approached, my father's opposition to my fiancé became a new source of contention. Omar, a kind and loving man, had won the approval of everyone who mattered to me, except my father. His disapproval stemmed from outdated prejudices, and I refused to let it derail my plans. When I reminded my father of the money he owed me, he flatly refused, claiming Julia had not repaid him. His audacity reignited the anger I had tried so hard to suppress. In the weeks leading up to the wedding, I made a difficult decision. My father would not be invited. I could no longer tolerate his attempts to control my life. To ensure he understood the gravity of his actions, I shared the full story with our extended family. The response was swift and unequivocal. My paternal grandfather, a man of principle, was particularly incensed. He called to confirm the details and assured me he would take action. What happened next was unexpected. My grandfather, the legal owner of the house my father and Susan lived in, decided to transfer ownership to me as a wedding gift. His decision was both a gesture of support and a calculated move to hold my father accountable. When the news broke, my father was furious. He bombarded me with calls and messages, accusing me of betrayal. I ignored him, focusing instead on the life I was building with Omar. After the wedding, I met with Susan and Julia. Susan revealed truths that left me stunned. My father had not only depleted Julia's fund, but had also lied about Emma's medical expenses. He had used the money to cover the costs of an affair, silencing his partner with hush money. The revelation was both shocking and devastating. Susan, always a pillar of strength, was now grappling with the betrayal that had upended her life. Determined to support Susan, I took action. I drafted a lease agreement for my father, setting a high rent for the house he had taken for granted. The proceeds would go to Susan, providing her with the financial stability she desperately needed. My father's reaction was predictable: anger, followed by desperation. He tried to rally family members to his side, but his efforts were futile. The truth was out, and his actions had alienated him from everyone who once stood by him. As I navigated this tumultuous chapter, I found solace in the unwavering support of Omar and my mother. They reminded me of the strength I had gained through years of hardship. Though the situation with my father remained unresolved, I felt a sense of closure. The house, once a symbol of his authority, now represented my ability to reclaim the narrative of my life. In the months that followed, Susan began rebuilding her life. She filed for divorce and focused on creating a stable environment for Emma. I continued to provide financial and emotional support, grateful for the bond we had forged. The journey had not been easy. My father's influence had faded into the background, his presence now just a shadow of what it once was. Though the sting of his betrayal lingered, I chose to focus on the future, believing the worst was behind me. This path had taught me the true power of resilience and the importance of standing firm for what is right. Despite the chaos, I emerged stronger, ready to embrace the life I had fought so hard to build. As months passed into a year, I saw significant changes in Susan. With the divorce finalized, she was determined to embark on a new chapter and build a fulfilling career after years spent as a homemaker. Emma, too, was adjusting, though it was clear she missed the stability of her former life. Susan and I worked together to ensure Emma felt loved and supported, despite the changes surrounding her. Meanwhile, my father's life continued to unravel. The rent payments became a constant source of tension. Each month, he found new excuses to delay or reduce the amount, often citing financial hardship. While I had no obligation to ease his struggles, I knew the impact of his actions on Susan and Emma. I stood firm, enforcing the terms of the lease. It was a matter of principle, something my father had yet to learn. The more I learned of his past, the more I realized the extent of his deceit. During one of our conversations, Susan revealed that my father had been hiding debts from her for years. He had borrowed money from family members, often under false pretenses, leaving a trail of broken trust in his wake. Each new revelation deepened my resolve to distance myself from him. One afternoon, Julia visited unexpectedly. She had come to thank me once more for supporting her education and to share some exciting news. She had been accepted into a prestigious graduate program. Seeing her succeed, despite the obstacles she had faced, filled me with immense pride. It was a reminder that even in the midst of turmoil, there were moments of triumph. Julia's visit also brought an unexpected revelation. She confided that she had confronted my father, demanding accountability for his actions. As expected, he deflected blame and minimized his role in the chaos, but Julia stood her ground. Her courage inspired me, reaffirming my commitment to support her and Susan. As the holidays approached, I reflected on the year gone by. What had started as a simple request for help had evolved into a journey of self-discovery and empowerment. My relationship with Susan and Julia had deepened, and I found strength in the unwavering support of my husband and mother. While my father's actions continued to cause pain, they no longer defined me. On Christmas Eve, I hosted a small gathering at my home. Susan and Julia were there, along with my closest friends and family. The atmosphere was warm and joyful, a stark contrast to the tension that once characterized our family gatherings. As we exchanged gifts and shared stories, I felt a deep sense of gratitude. This was the family I had chosen, those who stood by me through the toughest times. By the time the new year arrived, I was ready to move forward. My father's presence in my life had become a distant memory, a reminder of lessons learned and resilience gained. With Susan and Julia by my side, I felt hopeful for the future. Together, we had built something stronger than the bonds of blood, a family forged through love, trust, and unwavering support.